To the outside world, Italy is a chaotic theater of unstable governments. We see prime ministers rise and fall with the seasons. We see a fragmented parliament, a struggling economy, and a picturesque tourist destination. But this chaos is a carefully curated illusion. It is a smokescreen designed to hide the static, unmoving reality of power in the Mediterranean. Italy is not a democracy. It is not a republic. For the last 100 years, Italy has functioned as a subsidiary of a single family office. You know them as the creators of Fiat. History knows them as the Agnellis. But today, they are the Uncrowned Kings, operating through a financial leviathan known as Exor. Stop looking at the politicians in Rome. They are temporary employees. We are here to expose the permanent owners. To understand the true structure of the Italian economy, you must understand that the Agnelli family does not just participate in the market, they are the market. Let's map the empire. It goes far beyond cars. Yes, they control Stellantis, the conglomerate that absorbed Fiat, Chrysler, Peugeot, and Jeep. But cars are just the visible tip of the iceberg. The Agnellis understood decades ago that to control a nation, you don't just need to own the factories, you need to own the narrative. Through the GEDI group, the family controls the two most influential newspapers in the country, La Repubblica and La Stampa, along with a vast network of local media and radio stations. Imagine if Jeff Bezos owned not just the Washington Post, but also General Motors, the New York Yankees, and had a controlling stake in the nation's heavy industry. That is the scale of influence we are talking about. This media monopoly allows them to perform cultural engineering. When a labor strike happens, the Agnellis own the factory where the workers strike, and they own the newspaper that tells the public why the strike is wrong. They frame every corporate bailout as a patriotic necessity, and every investigation into their finances as an attack on Italy. This creates a closed loop of power, labor, information, and distraction. Speaking of distraction, we cannot ignore the role of Juventus FC. In Italy, football is religion, and the Agnellis are the Pope. By owning the most popular team in the country, they utilize the ancient Roman strategy of bread and circuses. When the economy fails, when the factories close, there is always the match on Sunday. They use the emotional bond of millions of fans as a human shield against political scrutiny. You cannot hate the hand that feeds your passion. But the true extent of their control is currently being exposed in a courtroom battle that the Italian media tries desperately to bury. This is the inheritance war. Right now, a brutal legal war is raging between Margherita Agnelli, the daughter of the late patriarch, and her own son, John Elkann, the current emperor of Exor. Margherita claims that billions of euros in family wealth were hidden in secret offshore accounts in Switzerland and Liechtenstein, effectively bypassing the Italian state for decades. This lawsuit is the smoking gun. It proves that while the Agnellis were demanding taxpayer bailouts for Fiat in Rome, they were allegedly hiding their private fortune in tax havens. It reveals a parallel state, a family that exists above the law, unsearchable by the Italian Tax Revenue Agency and untouchable by the courts. In any other country, this would be the scandal of the century. In Italy, it is a whisper. Why? Because you don't investigate the landlords. Historically, this family has been treated with a reverence usually reserved for royalty. Gianni Agnelli, l'Avvocato, was the closest thing Italy had to a monarch in the 20th century. He didn't just lobby the government, he summoned it. He wore his watch over his shirt cuff, and Italian men copied him. He dictated industrial policy to the prime minister over breakfast. But today, under the leadership of his grandson, John Elkann, the strategy has shifted. The royalty mask has slipped off, revealing the cold face of private equity. Elkann is not interested in being the king of Italy. He is interested in being a global asset manager. The transition from Gianni to John is the transition from national leadership to financial extraction. The illusion of choice in Italy is absolute. You vote for a politician, but that politician must negotiate with the industrial lobby controlled by Exor. You buy a car, it's likely an Agnelli brand. You read the news to understand why wages are stagnant, and you are reading an Agnelli editorial. This creates a form of national Stockholm syndrome. The Italian public defends the very family that has privatized their nation's wealth. Exor has decoupled its fortune from the health of the host nation. While Italy sinks under the weight of public debt and stagnation, the Agnelli portfolio has grown to over $30 billion. They have mastered the art of being too big to fail, while simultaneously becoming too mobile to tax. This isn't just a story about a rich family. It is a case study in how the ultra-elite have stopped building nations and started stripping them for parts. Italy is just the first victim. The Uncrowned Kings are no longer benevolent rulers. They are asset managers preparing for a liquidation event. And the asset being liquidated is the Italian economy itself.
How does one family maintain feudal control in a modern capitalist society? They don't use armies. They use a sophisticated financial mechanism designed to separate control from risk. This is the genius of the Agnelli structure, specifically the holding company Exor. In a normal business, if you own 10% of the company, you get 10% of the vote. The Agnellis rejected this democratic concept of capitalism long ago. Through a complex system of multiple voting shares and nested holding companies, chiefly the Dutch entity Exor N.V, John Elkann controls an empire worth hundreds of billions with a fraction of the actual capital. This grants them absolute, dictatorial power without proportionate financial exposure. Their legal headquarters are in the Netherlands, their tax residency is often in the UK, and their factories are in Italy. They are citizens of capital, beholden to no single flag. But the true mechanism of their dominance is a strategy we call privatizing profits, socializing losses. This is the dark heart of the Italian economy. For decades, Fiat was the largest industrial employer in Italy. The Agnellis used this leverage to hold the entire Italian government hostage. Whenever the global car market dipped, whenever a factory became inefficient, or whenever they needed to modernize, the threat was always the same: subsidize us or we fire tens of thousands of workers, destabilizing the entire economy. And the state always blinked. The cost to the Italian taxpayer has been staggering. We are talking about billions of euros in state-sponsored layoff schemes known as Cassa Integrazione, direct industrial grants, favorable tax breaks, and generous scrap incentives for consumers. This taxpayer money meant for schools, roads, and healthcare, was funneled into Fiat coffers to keep the national champion alive. The Italian taxpayer effectively paid for the Agnellis' risk management. The narrative, constantly echoed by their media empire, was that what is good for Fiat is good for Italy. But the question remains: when the profits returned, did they flow back to the Italian treasury? No, they flowed into dividends, buybacks, and international acquisitions controlled by the Dutch holding company Exor N.V. The losses were Italian, the profits were global. This is the ultimate betrayal of the social contract. They used Italian labor, Italian infrastructure, and Italian taxes to build a global fortress, then airlifted the legal headquarters to a tax haven, utilizing Dutch corporate law to solidify control and escape the very Italian tax system that had subsidized their factories for 50 years. They left the rust and the debt behind in Turin. Furthermore, consider their influence on the political and regulatory class. This is the Turin-Rome axis. No prime minister, regardless of political stripe, dares to challenge the structure of Exor. The family is simply too integrated. The revolving door between Agnelli executives and the Ministry of Industry in Rome is constant. They don't lobby for laws, they pre-write them. Any law regarding industrial policy, media concentration, or labor reform passes only with the silent, non-negotiable approval of the Agnelli boardroom. To challenge them is to challenge the stability of the stock market, the employment rate, and the media landscape all at once. It is political suicide. This unchecked power allowed them to systematically dismantle the strength of the labor unions. By controlling the largest industrial group and the leading liberal newspapers, they have effectively paralyzed the Italian labor movement. The media narrative, owned by the GEDI group, consistently frames any push for higher wages or better working conditions as an attack on national competitiveness and a threat to Made in Italy. They have convinced a nation that their declining standard of living is an economic inevitability rather than a direct result of corporate extraction and political capture. The Agnelli empire is a masterclass in global financial engineering designed for value extraction. Exor functions as a massive vacuum cleaner. It sucks liquidity and talent out of the real economy and traps it in the financial economy. They sold Magneto Marelli, a jewel of Italian high-tech manufacturing, to the Japanese. They spun off Ferrari to unlock value for shareholders, not stakeholders. Every move is calculated to maximize the stock price of the holding company, often at the expense of the long-term industrial integrity of the nation. They are no longer patriotic industrialists, they are financial sovereign actors. The spider's web is complete. It is a mechanism that extracts value from the Italian worker and taxpayer, filters it through flexible foreign jurisdictions, and deposits it into the private accounts of a dynasty that no longer considers itself Italian. They are citizens of capital, and their loyalty is only to the dividend. They have perfected the art of parasitism on a sovereign scale, and the host nation is now terminally weakened. This brings us to the ultimate signal of betrayal, the Great Decoupling.
This brings us to the most terrifying part of our investigation. If you want to know the future of a country, don't listen to what its politicians say, watch what its richest family does. The Agnellis are screaming a warning signal to the world, and nobody is listening. The signal is this: the Uncrowned Kings are abdicating. For a century, the Agnelli fortune was tied to Italian steel, Italian rubber, and Italian sweat. Their destiny was intrinsically linked to Italy's GDP. But over the last 5 years, under John Elkann, a radical and surgical shift has occurred. We call it the Great Decoupling. The merger of Fiat Chrysler with Peugeot to form Stellantis was not a merger of equals. It was a strategically executed French takeover facilitated by the Agnellis to systematically cash out and shift risk. They accepted that the center of gravity for the European car industry would irrevocably move to Paris and Amsterdam as long as they remained the largest shareholder in the new, diversified, and legally non-Italian entity. They essentially sold the Italian automotive industrial core to France in exchange for liquid capital and global mobility. The promise of Made in Italy was sacrificed for the security of the dividend. What are they doing with that immense capital? They are not building new factories in southern Italy. They are not investing in Italian infrastructure. They are executing a massive strategic pivot into global healthcare, luxury, and financial risk. Look at the ledger. Exor recently bought a massive 15% stake in Philips, the Dutch healthcare technology giant, for €2.6 billion. They acquired a significant stake in Christian Louboutin, the French luxury shoe brand. Crucially, they control Partner RE, one of the world's leading reinsurance companies, allowing them to hedge against catastrophic global financial and climate risks. Do you see the distinct pattern? They are divesting from the old world of cyclical, capital-intensive Italian industry, cars. They are buying into the future of resilient, high-margin global assets: healthcare for the aging population, luxury for the consolidating wealth class, reinsurance to hedge against the environmental chaos. They are betting on an aging, sick world and an extremely wealthy, unequal world. But most importantly, they are placing a definitive bet against Italy. They know the fundamental math. Italy has the second oldest population in the world, ensuring declining productivity and crushing pension costs. Its debt-to-GDP ratio is currently over 140%, an unsustainable liability that will inevitably lead to a sovereign crisis. Its industrial productivity has been flat for 20 years. The Agnellis have run the numbers, and they see that the Italian business model is broken beyond repair. Instead of trying to fix it, which was the role of the industrialist, John Elkann is liquidating it, which is the role of the asset manager. This is the 2026 crash connection. The smart money moves first. The Agnellis moving billions out of Italian industrial manufacturing and into global recession-proof assets is the equivalent of the captain getting on the first lifeboat and simultaneously selling his ticket to the band. They are diversifying away from the very country that made them rich because they anticipate a systemic failure. This leaves Italy in a profoundly dangerous position. Without the industrial commitment of its royal family, the manufacturing decline of northern Italy will accelerate. Stellantis is already cutting production in Turin, idling factories, and clashing with the government. The emotional narrative of national pride is gone, replaced by the cold, ruthless logic of global capital allocation. The Agnellis are positioning themselves for a world of scarcity, aging populations, and extreme wealth concentration. They are securing their dynasty for the next 100 years by surgically severing their ties to the sinking ship of the Italian state. Their abandonment is not merely a business decision. It is the ultimate leading indicator of the systemic, sovereign collapse we have warned about. The uncrowned kings have packed their bags. The palace is empty, and the storm is just beginning.